This is a Sports Catastrophe production.
Hey there, Heather, ho there, it's Jeff Cutter Diamond. Welcome you to another Sports Catastrophe Birthday Boy. And normally I do a birthday boy as someone who is still living among us. But January 2nd, well, after all, I did 3 birthday boys. January 2nd, I've done Edgar Martinez, David Cohn, and Francois Pinault in that order. But I found this guy to be huge. This guy right here is a legend. He is actually the Don King of boxing before Don King even existed. He was a boxing promoter, one of the greatest of all time, as the book says. It's not a promo for the book. It's just that. Just want to tell you how good this guy is. He was a good boxing promoter. However, it wasn't just that. He actually built one of the Madison Square Gardens in New York City and helped found the New York Rangers of the NHL. So anyway, he was the leading promoter of his day, the 1920s version of Don King, if you will. But Tex Rickard not only did that, he operated several saloons, hotels, and casinos across Alaska, Nevada, and even north of the border in Canada. So anyway, he was born January 2nd, 1870 in Kansas City, Tex Rickard. His real name is George Rickard, if you must know. His youth was spent in Sherman, Texas, and he actually became a cowboy at age 11. By the age of 23, he was actually marshal of the town of Henrietta, Texas, which was shocking and all that. And then a year later, he married Leona Biddick and had a son. Unfortunately, a month after giving birth to the son, Leona died March 11th, and then Curtis died May 4th, 1895, so they didn't last too long, unfortunately. Anyway, Tex Rickard went to Alaska because of the gold rush, and he learned of the gold rush of 1897, so he hurried to the Klondike, selling their holding, staked their claims and sold their holdings for $60,000. And this is 1897 money, too. Then they opened a saloon in Dawson City in the Yukon in Canada, one of the territories of Canada. But Rickard lost everything through gambling. Gambling is not good because there are times he will lose it all instead of winning it all. However, he was a bartender at the Monte Carlo Saloon and Gambling Hall, he actually decided to promote boxing matches. And Tex Rickard actually did leave to chase the gold strikes in Nome, Alaska. Rickard was actually a friend of Wyatt Earp, who was this Western lawsman, all that, who was also a boxing fan. Wyatt Earp actually officiated a match between Bob Fitzsimmons and Tom Sharkey in 1896. Anyway, Tex Rickard would open the Northern Hotel, competing saloons in Nome, Alaska. In 1902, Rickard would marry Edith May Haig of Sacramento, having a daughter, Bessie. Edith would die October 1925. So anyway, by 1906, Tex Rickard moved from Alaska to Nevada, running a saloon and casino in Goldfield, Nevada. He would promote a match between Joe Gans and Battling Nelson. The gate record at the time was $69,000. So anyway, he would open the Northern Hotel in Ely, Nevada the next year, and would have many mining properties. In 1909, him and John Gleason got the right to promote the world heavyweight fight between James Jeffries and Jack Johnson. Rickard wanted to have the fight in San Francisco. However, the governor would oppose it, so Rickard moved it to Reno, Nevada. This was the fight in which Jack Johnson shocked James Jeffries and made black heavyweight championship history, and making white America go ballistic. And you think racial tensions are high now, think of it a century beforehand. So anyway, by 1911, he actually said he was through with prize fighting and went to Argentina. he would start a cattle ranch in Paraguay. And at its peak, the ranch had 1 million acres and had cattle numbering as high as 50,000. Unfortunately, the ranch was involved in a political controversy between 4 South American countries, and 2 of his employees were killed by Bolivian soldiers. By 1915, the cattle business failed, and he would lose up to $1 million. And remember, this is 1915 cash. This is not 2024 money. Anyway, Rickard would return kind of with his tail between his legs in 1916 to the U.S. So Rickard would actually promote a fight between Jess Willard and Frank Moran, March 17, St. Patrick's Day, 1916, at Madison Square Garden. But not the Madison Square Garden you know now. The second iteration. The current Madison Square Garden is MSG number 4. So anyway, at that second Madison Square Garden, it was an indoor event which set a gate receipt record of 152,000. But remember, this is 1916 money. And actually, it was a no decision. Rickard got lucky and got to promote the 4th of July fight in 1919 when Jess Willard took on Jack Dempsey in Toledo. The stadium was supposed to hold 80,000 fans, but only got a quarter of that, 20,000. Despite all that, Rickard did make a profit of $100K, so that's still good. So anyway, after the Willard-Dempsey fight, Rickard wanted to have a match. He thought about Jack Dempsey versus George Carpentier, and this would have been one of the best fights around. So he managed to get to be the promoter of that fight, and it would fight at a specially built arena in Jersey City, New Jersey, July 2nd, 1921. It drew 90,000 fans. It was the first boxing fight to produce $1 million gate, and the first title fight to be carried over on radio. Remember, radio was not as big and easy to access in the 1920s as it is now in the 2020s. Rickard would have a profit of more than $500,000. So anyway, after boxing was established as legal boxing in the state of New York, Rickard actually got a lease of Madison Square Garden from its owner. And at MSG2, he would have some amateur fights, but have some key fights, as Jack Dempsey would take on Bill Brennan, and Benny Leonard, would face Reggie Mitchell. He would actually host many events at Madison Square Garden too, including 6-day bicycle races, and actually had the world's largest indoor swimming pool at the time. Unfortunately, on February 17, 1922, he was actually indicted on charges of abducting and sexually assaulting 4 underage girls. He gave up control of MSG2 and was not allowed to make or promote boxing matches in New York State. Rickard was found not guilty on one of the indictments, and the others were dropped, so he avoided it. So anyway, despite all the Tex, Rickard was allowed to promote fights, and he would promote the first boxing card at Yankee Stadium in 1923. Not the Yankee Stadium you all know nowadays, but the original Yankee Stadium, the one that Babe Ruth christened with that home run, and drew 60,000 spectators and made $182,000, which would be donated to a milk fund. And then later that year, in September 1923, at the Polo Grounds, Rickard would promote a second $1 million gate when 100,000 fans would flock the Polo Grounds to see Jack Dempsey versus Luis Angel Firpo. Anyway, Rickard would promote a big fight in September of 24 between Firpo and Harry Willis in Jersey City. He would lose money, even though there were some good fans. Rickard was actually convicted of violating a federal law in 1925 that prevented the interstate transportation of fight films. So practically, whatever fight film, like if the fight was in New York State, it would stay in New York State. You were not allowed to go state to state. He was given a fine instead of jail time. Rickard got a giant card at Sequential Stadium in Philadelphia. I think it was the predecessor to JFK, our JFK Stadium in Philly. I can't remember. But anyway, Jack Dempsey would face Gene Tunney for the first time in 1926. 135,000 fans flocked to Philadelphia and brought in a gate of almost 1.9 mil. The rematch was at Soldier Field in Chicago, September 1927, in one I covered years ago. And it was the long count fight. Remember that fight that saw Dempsey think he won, but he didn't go to neutral corner, which was a new rule, and Tunney was allowed to get up at a certain count. That fight had a $2 million gate and had a $1 million purse. So anyway, he would incorporate a new Madison Square Garden Corporation made in 1923 to try to build one. So he would purchase a block on 8th Avenue between 49th and 50th Streets to make Madison Square Garden 3. He acquired the rights to the name Madison Square Garden, and the building's owners decided to tear down the second MSG to make it an office building. The new arena would open November 1925. They destroyed the car barns that was part of that block. So from January to November. So it took 10 months to build Madison Square Garden 3. The first major fight would be Jack Delaney versus Paul Berlenbach. So anyway, the first year of Madison Square Garden 3 was when the New York Americans came into the NHL. Well, the reason why the Americans came into the NHL was because Hamilton, who were the NHL regular season champs in 1925, wanted more money. Because of the fact that the NHL decided to move from 24 games to 30 games a season because of Montreal getting a second team, the Maroons, and Boston also being in the NHL. That didn't go over so well, and all the players were suspended unless they make an apology and pay a fine. And then, Hamilton was sold off to New York interest, and the Americans were the old Hamilton Tigers, if you will, and did okay. However, Madison Square Garden Corporation wanted to make a team of their own and put a second team in New York City, and they did. That team would be nicknamed Texas Rangers, and would later be known as the New York Rangers. Of course, the New York Rangers, great tradition, despite the fact they had a 54-year cup drought, which is not the longest in history anymore. Thank you very much, Toronto. But the fact is the Rangers were dominant. They actually won the Stanley Cup in 1928 in their second season, I like to say. Or is it third season? I think it was their second season. Yeah, they won the Stanley Cup in that. They won the Stanley Cup in 1933 and 1940. They were practically one of the best American teams other than Detroit, if you will, back in the 30s. And all that. And they had some colorful players, some great moments. Blue Shirt Underground Facebook page. Go click on that. Anyway, Rickard actually wanted to build 7 so-called Madison Square Gardens around the country. And he got a 25-year lease for a sports arena in Boston. It wasn't called Madison Square Garden in Boston. It was called the Boston Garden. So Tex Rickard, in a way, got Boston the legendary Boston Garden, which was amazing. All that. Rickard and his partner opened a Greyhound track in Miami. They wanted future ventures within the state of Florida. And Tex Rickard wanted to build a hotel casino that would rival Monte Carlo, as Las Vegas was not really centered around that kind of stuff when Rickard was around. So anyway, there was a thing on Christmas Eve 1928, Rickard left New York for Miami to make arrangements for the Jack Sharkey Young Stribling match. Somehow, in some way, in Florida, he was stricken with appendicitis and was operated on. However, the medicine back in 1929 was a whole lot different than it is now, almost 100 years later. And he died of complications from a appendectomy, January 6, 1929. So Tex Rickard ended up being 59 years old when he died. And the world of boxing really was shocked. he was a great promoter. He had great fights and all that. I know that you don't know many of those fighters, but man, Tech's record was still good. And heck, he gave birth to the New York Rangers. And that's what makes Jim Schmiedenberg and Eddie Geik and all the rest of the Blue Shirt Underground people tick. Sorry for the promotions, but hey, you know what? They've taken me in for 13 plus years. I might as well give them a bit of a break. Anyhow, I'm Jeff Diamond.